Have you ever been told you're too young, too inexperienced, or just not ready no matter how hard you work or how much you know? Maybe you felt the sting of being overlooked, the frustration of having your ideas brushed aside simply because of your age. Maybe you sat in the back of the room watching the so-called experts struggle, thinking, if only they'd listen. If you've ever felt underestimated or ignored, stick around, because this story is for you. And if you know someone who's been told they're too young or not enough, share this with them. Who knows? Maybe you'll see yourself in Mira's fight for her voice to be heard. Asterisk. That was Cadet Mira Patel's reality every single day. At 22, Mira was the youngest intelligence analyst ever assigned to the Joint Operations Command. She looked even younger, petite, with sharp brown eyes and a nervous energy that made her stand out among the rows of starched uniforms and seasoned faces. Her badge said Specialist, but everyone in the war room just called her Kid. She'd graduated top of her class, aced every simulation, and could recite enemy troop movements from memory. But none of that seemed to matter. The generals barely glanced her way during briefings. The colonels called her the intern. The other analysts, all older men, dismissed her with polite smiles. It was a running joke. Let the kid fetch the coffee. Or maybe she can run the PowerPoint. But Mira didn't complain. She watched, listened, and learned. She took notes on everything. The way the generals argued, the patterns in their decisions, the mistakes they made and never admitted. She paid attention to the details everyone else missed, and she waited. The crisis began on a Monday. The war room was buzzing with tension. Overnight, a rogue militia had seized a critical dam in a neighboring country, one that supplied water and electricity to millions. Satellite images showed trucks and armed men blocking the access roads. The local government was panicking. The world was watching. General Harlan, a legend with 4 decades of service, stood at the head of the table, barking orders. We need options. I want a strike plan on my desk in 1 hour. No mistakes. Colonel Reyes, the operations chief, rattled off a list of assets, drones, special forces, air support. The analysts scrambled, pulling up maps and satellite feeds, running simulations. Mira sat quietly at her station, watching the chaos unfold. She saw the flaw almost immediately. The generals were focused on brute force retaking, the dam with overwhelming power. But the militia had hostages, and the dam's control room was rigged with explosives. Any assault risked catastrophe, flooding cities downstream, killing thousands. Mira raised her hand. Sir, I think. No one heard her. The room was too loud, the stakes too high. She tried again. Louder. General Harlan, I have a suggestion. He barely looked up. Not now, specialist. Let the adults work. Mira bit her tongue, frustration burning in her chest. She watched as the generals argued over strike routes and casualty projections, missing the most important detail. The militia supply trucks were moving in a pattern, always stopping at the same service road, never staying more than 10 minutes. She pulled up the satellite feed, zooming in on the trucks. They weren't carrying weapons or food. They were carrying fuel. Without those trucks, the militia's generators would fail, shutting down their communications and disabling the explosives. She typed up her analysis, flagged it urgent, and sent it to the operations chief. No reply. The clock ticked down. The generals settled on a plan. A dawn assault, airstrikes followed by a ground team. Mira's heart pounded. She knew it wouldn't work. She knew people would die. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly. The room fell silent. General Harlan, she said, voice trembling but clear. If you attack now, you'll trigger the explosives. The hostages will die, and the dam will be lost. All eyes turned to her, some annoyed, some amused, and What do you suggest, specialist? Harlan asked, barely hiding his impatience. Mira swallowed her fear. Cut their fuel supply. Target the trucks, not the dam. Once their generators fail, their communications and detonators will go offline. We can negotiate or move in with minimal risk. The room erupted in debate. Some dismissed her idea as naive. Others, desperate for a solution, argued in her favor. The generals demanded proof. Mira pulled up the satellite images, the logistics, data, the patterns she'd mapped out. She explained, step by step, how the militia depended on those trucks, how their entire plan hinged on a fragile supply line. For the first time, the room listened. General Harlan stared at her, then at the data. He was silent for a long moment. If you're wrong, specialist, it's on your head. Mira nodded, her hands shaking. I know, sir. The order went out. Target the supply trucks. Monitor the dam. Hours passed. The world waited. At dawn, the militia's generators sputtered and died. Their communications went dark. The explosives failed to detonate. Special forces moved in, freeing the hostages without a shot fired. The crisis was over. And for the first time, the war room didn't call her a kid. They called her the analyst who solved the crisis no general could. The war room was never quiet, but that morning, a new kind of energy buzzed through the air. The crisis at the dam had ended without a single hostage lost, and everyone knew it was because of Mira Patel. Yet, as the sun rose over the city and the news of the successful operation spread, Mira felt more exposed than triumphant. She stood at her desk, hands trembling as she scrolled through the satellite images one last time. The trucks were gone, the militia scattered, the hostages safe. It should have felt like victory. Instead, she felt every eye in the room on her, some with awe, some with envy, some with suspicion. General Harlan strode in, his face stern as fossil. Always, but there was a new respect in his gaze. He called the room to attention. Specialist Patel's analysis prevented a disaster. Let's remember that it doesn't matter where a good idea comes from, only that we're smart enough to listen. Some of the older officers nodded, others looked away. Mira caught the eye of Colonel Reyes, who gave her a small, approving nod. For the first time, she felt like she belonged, but the moment was fleeting. As the generals returned to their routines, Mira's inbox exploded with new assignments. Her reputation had changed overnight. She was no longer invisible, but now every problem, every crisis, every impossible puzzle seemed to land on her desk. She barely had time to breathe before the next emergency hit. 2 days later, a coded message arrived from the border. A convoy of humanitarian aid had gone missing. Dozens of trucks, drivers, and medical staff vanished without a trace. The region was unstable, plagued by warring factions and shifting alliances. The generals debated whether it was a kidnapping, an ambush, or something worse. Mira was assigned to the incident. She pored over satellite feeds, intercepted radio chatter, and logistics reports. Patterns began to emerge, strange gaps in the convoy's GPS trail. Faint signals from an abandoned airstrip, a spike in encrypted communications from a nearby village. She brought her findings to Colonel Reyes. Sir, I think the convoy was diverted intentionally. Someone on the inside is feeding information to the enemy. Look at these timestamps. Every time the convoy stopped, there was a burst of coded traffic from this cell tower. Reyes frowned, studying the data. You're saying we have a mole? Mira nodded. And if we don't act fast, the hostages will disappear for good. The colonel took her analysis to General Harlan, who called an emergency meeting. Mira was invited to present her findings, a first for someone her age and rank. She stood at the head of the table, heart pounding as she explained her theory. Some of the generals were skeptical. You're basing this on cell phone pings? One scoffed. Mira held her ground. It's not just the pings. It's the timing, the routes, the way the convoy was split. Someone knew exactly where to strike. Harlan listened in silence, then turned to Reyes. Prepare a team. Specialist Patel, you're coming with us. Mira blinked in surprise. Sir, you found the trail. You're going to help us follow it. The next morning, Mira found herself in a helicopter flying low over the borderlands. She wore a borrowed flak jacket and clutched her laptop like a lifeline. The world below was a patchwork of villages, fields, and winding roads, beautiful but dangerous. The team landed at a forward operating base where Mira was greeted with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The soldiers were older, tougher, and not used to taking orders from someone who looked barely out of college. She set up her equipment in a dusty tent, pulling up maps and radio intercepts. Reyes hovered nearby, offering quiet encouragement. You've got this, Patel. Trust your instincts. Mira worked through the night, piecing together the convoy's last known movements. She noticed something odd, a pattern in the way the trucks had been spaced, almost as if someone wanted them to be found in a certain order. She traced the pattern to a remote farmhouse, hidden in a grove of trees. The signals were strongest there, and recent drone footage showed tire tracks leading into the barn. She reported her findings to Reyes, who relayed them to Harlan. The general ordered a reconnaissance mission at dawn. The soldiers moved out before sunrise, Mira riding in the back of an armored vehicle. Her heart hammered in her chest as they approached the farmhouse. The world outside was silent. The only sound, the crunch of gravel under the tires. The team fanned out, weapons ready. Mira stayed behind, monitoring the radio. Suddenly, shots rang out in ambush. She heard shouts, the crackle of gunfire, and then Reyes' voice over the comms. We've got hostiles, need backup. Mira's mind raced. She pulled up the drone feed, searching for any sign of the enemy. She spotted movement in the trees, a second group of fighters circling behind the team. She grabbed the radio. Colonel Reyes, enemy flanking from the east. 2 trucks, 10 men. Reyes relayed the warning, and the team adjusted their positions just in time. The ambush was broken. The attackers scattered. The farmhouse was cleared, and inside they found the missing drivers, shaken but alive. When the team returned to base, Mira was greeted with cheers. Soldiers clapped her on the back. Reyes gave her a rare smile, and even General Harlan nodded in approval. You saved lives today, Specialist, he said. You've got a talent for this. Mira felt a surge of pride, but also a new weight of responsibility. She knew the next crisis was already on the horizon. The rescue at the farmhouse made headlines across the region. Hostages freed in daring operation, proclaimed one news site. Young analyst's insight saves dozens, read another. Mira Patel's name was suddenly everywhere on briefing. Slides in radio chatter whispered in the halls of command. But with recognition came pressure. The generals, once dismissive, now leaned on her for every crisis. The colonel sent her urgent emails at all hours. Even the soldiers at the forward base began to treat her with a mix of awe and expectation. Mira felt the weight of their hopes and their doubts settle on her shoulders. Barely a week after the convoy rescue, a new emergency erupted. A series of coordinated cyber attacks crippled the communications grid in the capital. Power flickered. Water pumps failed, and the city's emergency lines went dark. Panic spread as rumors of sabotage and invasion filled the airwaves. Mira was summoned to the war room at dawn. General Harlan paced at the head of the table, his face drawn and tired. We have no comms with 3 divisions. The city's on edge. If we don't restore order, we could lose control. Colonel Reyes handed Mira a stack of reports. We need to know who's behind this, and fast. Mira dove into the data, scanning logs and intercepts, looking for patterns. She noticed something odd. The attacks weren't random. They hit substations and relays in a precise sequence, as if the enemy knew exactly where to strike. For maximum chaos, she cross-referenced the attack times with troop movements and found a chilling overlap. "Sir, I think the cyber attacks are a smokescreen. Someone's using the blackout to move forces into the city." Harlan frowned. "You sure?" Mira nodded, pulling up a map. "Look, these neighborhoods lost power just as these unmarked convoys rolled in. They're using the confusion to get close to the government buildings." The generals debated, some skeptical, others alarmed. Mira stood her ground, walking them through the evidence. Finally, Harlan gave the order. "Lock down the city center. Move reserves to these locations. And get the grid back online." Mira joined the emergency response team in the city's underground command bunker. The air was thick with tension, radios hissing with partial signals, officers barking orders over the din. She set up her laptop, tracing the cyber attacks. Origin. She found a clue, an unusual data packet bouncing between servers in 3 countries. It was a signature she recognized from a previous case, a hacker group known for working with the enemy militia. She flagged the packet, traced its path, and relayed the information to the cyber defense team. "Block these IPs, reroute traffic through the backup node, and deploy the firewall patch I sent last month." The team worked furiously, following Mira's instructions. Slowly, the grid flickered back to life, first the hospitals, then the water pumps, then the emergency lines. But the real crisis was just beginning as power returned. Reports flooded in. Armed men in stolen uniforms had seized 2 government buildings, taking hostages and demanding the release of captured militia leaders. Police and military units rushed to the scene, but the enemy was dug in, using the blackout. As cover. Mira watched the feeds, heart pounding. She saw the enemy's pattern, how they used the chaos to move, how they exploited every weakness in the city's defenses. She pulled up building schematics, security logs, and traffic cams. She noticed a flaw. The enemy had sealed the main entrances, but left the service tunnels beneath the buildings unguarded. She flagged the route, sent it to the tactical team. "Approach from below," she advised. "They won't expect it." The team moved in, using the tunnels to breach the buildings. The fighting was fierce, but the element of surprise worked. Hostages were freed. The enemy captured as dawn broke over the city. Mira slumped in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. She'd been awake for 36 hours, running on coffee and adrenaline. The generals congratulated her. The mayor called her a hero. The news ran her photo on every channel. But Mira felt only a bone-deep fatigue. She knew the enemy would try again. She knew the next crisis was already brewing. She stepped outside into the cool morning air. The city was waking up, lights on, sirens fading, people emerging from shelters. Mira watched them, feeling both. Proud and isolated. She was the youngest in the war room, the one everyone called when things went wrong. But she was also just a girl who wanted to help, who missed her family, who sometimes wished someone else could carry the burden. As she walked back to the bunker, her phone buzzed. A new alert. Another crisis. Mira squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and went back inside. The city was still trembling from the blackout and hostage crisis, but there was no time for rest. Mira barely had a chance to eat or sleep before the next emergency landed on her desk. Coalition intelligence, her network, picked up a coded message. Phase 2 begins at dawn. General Harlan called an emergency meeting before sunrise. The war room was tense, the air thick with exhaustion and anxiety. Mira, running on caffeine and adrenaline, felt the familiar twist of dread in her stomach. She knew the enemy wouldn't rest. Neither could she. Satellite feeds showed unusual activity at the border. Armored vehicles massing, supply trucks moving in convoys, and communication spikes along the enemy's encrypted channels. Mira's fingers flew over her keyboard, cross-referencing troop movements with intercepted messages. She saw the pattern emerge a feint toward the northern checkpoint, but the real threat was to the east, where the city's defenses were weakest. It was classic misdirection, but with a twist. The enemy was using her own playbook, adapting to her strategies. She flagged the threat to Harlan. They're coming for the east gate. The northern buildup is a distraction. Some of the older officers scoffed. We've reinforced the east. They wouldn't risk a direct assault. Mira shook her head. They don't need to break through. They just need to hold us there while their saboteurs hit the water plant and power grid again. If they succeed, the city will be paralyzed. Harlan trusted her instincts. Reinforce the east. Double security at the utilities. Mira, I want you running point on this. As the city braced for attack, Mira assembled her team in the command bunker. Lila, her tech specialist, monitored cyber threats. Reyes coordinated with field units. Mira herself juggled a dozen data streams, watching for the first sign of the enemy's next move. The attack began at dawn. Mortar shells rained down on the eastern gate, drawing defenders into a brutal firefight. At the same time, a series of explosions rocked the water plant, plunging half the city into chaos. Mira's mind raced. She saw the enemy's plan unfolding, a two-pronged assault designed to stretch their resources thin and create panic. She relayed orders, shifting reserves, rerouting power from backup grids, and sending emergency crews to the blast sites. But the enemy was relentless. Every time Mira countered one move, they hit somewhere else. It was like playing chess against a grandmaster who knew her every strategy dot as the battle raged. Mira received a chilling message on her secure terminal. You're predictable, Mira. We know your moves. You can't save them all. Her blood ran cold. The sender's address was untraceable, but the implication was clear. The enemy had eyes inside the coalition. Someone was feeding them her plans. She called Reyes and Lila into a private room. We have a mole. Someone is leaking our strategies. Lila frowned. How do we find them? Mira thought fast. We feed false information, set a trap. I'll draft a fake plan for a counterattack at the west gate. If the enemy moves on it, we'll know who tipped them off. Reyes nodded grimly. I'll keep watch on the command staff. You focus on the data. Mira crafted a detailed, believable plan for a Westgate counteroffensive and sent it only to a select group of senior officers. She waited, nerves frayed, as Lila monitored outgoing communications. Within hours, enemy scouts began probing the Westgate exactly as Mira had predicted. Lila flagged the leak, an encrypted message sent from Colonel Voss's terminal. Reyes confronted Voss, who denied everything. But the evidence was damning logs, timestamps, and a hidden USB drive containing enemy codes. Voss was arrested, and the mole was exposed, but the damage was done. The enemy had already used Mira's own brilliance against her, adapting faster than she could counter. With the mole gone, the coalition regained the initiative. Mira's team worked around the clock, patching vulnerabilities, restoring water and power, and coordinating with field commanders. But the enemy's attacks grew more desperate and more personal. A bomb detonated near Mira's parents' apartment. They survived, but the message was clear. No one was safe. Mira's resolve hardened. She doubled her efforts, sleeping even less, pushing her team to the limit. She knew the enemy was watching her every move, waiting for her to slip. The pressure took its toll. Mira snapped at her team, made mistakes, missed meals. Lila confronted her one night after a particularly tense briefing. You can't do this alone, Mira. You're burning out. Let us help. Mira hesitated. She'd always felt she had to be perfect, to prove herself every second. But now, with the city's fate hanging in the balance, She realized she needed her team more than ever. She apologized, delegated more, and listened to her team's ideas. The mood in the bunker shifted, tension eased, collaboration improved, and new solutions emerged. Just as the coalition began to stabilize, a new crisis erupted. The enemy launched a cyber attack on the city's hospital network, locking critical systems and threatening to release patient data unless the coalition surrendered a key district. Mira raced to the hospital command center, coordinating with doctors and IT staff. The ransomware was sophisticated, but she spotted a flaw, a backdoor left open by the hackers. She worked with Lila to exploit the vulnerability, restoring access to the hospital systems and tracing the attack back to an enemy. Safe house. Field units raided the location, capturing the hackers and seizing their equipment. The city's hospitals came back online, and the enemy's leverage was broken. In the aftermath, Mira found herself alone in the war room, staring at the city map. She'd won another round, but at what cost? The enemy was adapting, the attacks were escalating, and the toll on her team and herself was mounting. She called her mother, voice trembling. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "You don't have to do it alone, Mira. Trust your team. Trust yourself. You've already done more than anyone could ask." Mira wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and returned to her post. Realizing she needed more support, Mira reached out to allied intelligence agencies. She shared her data, coordinated with foreign analysts, and built a network of trusted partners. Together, they uncovered the enemy's next move, a plan to sabotage the city's main bridge, cutting off supplies and trapping thousands. Mira's team worked with engineers and security forces to reinforce the bridge, set traps for the saboteurs, and launch a preemptive strike. The enemy's plan was foiled, and the city remained connected. As the city celebrated another victory, Mira received a new message. This isn't over. You can't protect everyone. Next time, we come for you. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. The enemy was still out there, watching, waiting. But for the first time, Mira didn't feel alone. She had her team, her allies, and the knowledge that she could rise to any challenge. The city's uneasy calm was as fragile as glass. Mira's victory over the hospital cyber attack had bought them time, but every celebration was shadowed by the enemy's chilling promise. Next time, we come for you. For the first time, Mira felt the weight of being a target, not just for her ideas, but for who she was. She moved through the command bunker with a new wariness, noticing the way strangers lingered at the edge of her vision, the way encrypted messages sometimes arrived with no sender. She checked in with her parents every night, her voice careful, her words coded. She trusted her team, but she trusted almost no one else. The coalition's intelligence network was humming with activity. Reports of enemy infiltrators, sabotage attempts, and coded chatter spiked. Mira and her team worked around the clock, barely sleeping, chasing leads that seemed to multiply with every hour. One morning, Lila burst into the command center, eyes wide. "We've got a breach. Someone's in the main data core." Mira's heart pounded. The data core was the brain of the city's defenses. If the enemy gained control, they could shut down communications, scramble orders, and even trigger false alarms to sow chaos. She raced to the server room with Lila and Reyes. The door was still locked, but the access log showed a recent entry, someone with high-level clearance. Mira's mind raced through the possibilities. Only a handful of people had that kind of access. They checked the security footage. The image was blurry, distorted by a looped feed. But Mira recognized the silhouette. Major Kessler, the base's logistics officer. Kessler was a quiet man, always polite, never drawing attention. Why would he do this? Lila whispered. Reyes shook his head. Maybe he's being blackmailed. Or maybe he's not who we thought. Myra's instincts screamed that something was off. She pulled up Kessler's personnel file, cross-referenced his recent movements, and found a pattern. Late-night visits to the Combs Tower, unreported meetings with supply convoys, encrypted. Messages sent from a burner phone. "He's the new mole," Myra said, "and he's about to hand the enemy everything." They moved fast. Reyes led a security team to intercept Kessler at the Combs Tower. Myra and Lila monitored his location via his ID badge. The tension was suffocating. One wrong move, and the city's secrets would be in enemy hands. Kessler tried to slip away through a maintenance tunnel, but Myra's team cut him off. Cornered, he tried to destroy his phone, but Lila was faster. She grabbed him, pulling the SIM card before he could wipe it. Kessler was taken into custody, silent and defiant. Mira scanned the phone's data, finding a trove of messages, maps, and enemy code words. The evidence was damning, but the damage was already spreading. The enemy had triggered a series of false alarm-simulated attacks on the city's food depots, fuel reserves, and evacuation centers. Panic rippled through the population. Myra's team scrambled to verify each threat, separating real danger from enemy noise. The city's nerves were frayed. Rumors of betrayal and sabotage spread like wildfire. Myra found herself fielding questions, not just from generals, but from frightened civilians, desperate for reassurance. She held a press conference, the first time she'd ever spoken directly to the public. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Myra's voice was steady. "We are under attack, not just by weapons, but by fear and misinformation. Stay calm, trust the emergency alerts, and support each other. We will get through this together." Her words were replayed across the city, bringing a measure of calm. But inside, Mira was exhausted. Each day felt like a lifetime, each night a test of endurance. As the coalition worked to restore order, a new crisis erupted. The enemy had planted explosives along the city's main water pipeline, threatening to cut off the supply to millions. Unless their demands were met, Myra's team raced to locate the bombs. They pored over blueprints, analyzed seismic data, and coordinated with bomb disposal experts. The enemy's messages taunted them. "Tick-tock, Myra. How many can you save?" Lila found a clue, a pattern in the timing of the threats, matching the city's maintenance schedule. Mira realized the bombs were set to detonate during the next routine inspection. She relayed the warning to the bomb squad, who moved in ahead of schedule. The operation was tense. Every second counted. Mira watched the feeds, heart in her throat, as the team defused the explosives one by one. When the last bomb was neutralized, the city erupted in cheers. Mira slumped in her chair, relief and exhaustion mingling. But the victory came at a cost. One of the bomb squad officers, a young woman named Sergeant Kim, was injured during the operation. Mira visited her in the hospital, bringing flowers and a handwritten note. Kim smiled weakly. "You saved a lot of lives, Myra. Don't blame yourself for the risks we take." Mira squeezed her hand. "I just wish we could save everyone." Kim's eyes were kind. "No one can, but you keep trying. That's what matters." The crisis brought Myra's team closer. She learned to trust Lila's instincts, to rely on Reyes's judgment, to delegate tasks and share credit. The bunker became a place of camaraderie, not just stress. Reyes pulled her aside one evening. "You're not alone in this, Mira. We're with you, always." Mira nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope, not just for victory, but for a future beyond the war room. As the enemy's attacks slowed, the city began to heal. Power was restored, water flowed freely, and the streets filled with life again. Myra's name was spoken with respect, not just among the generals, but among the people she'd helped save. One night, as she walked home through the city, a little girl ran up to her, holding her mother's hand. "Are you the lady who saved the hospital?" The girl asked. Mira knelt down, smiling. I helped. But a lot of people worked together. The girl hugged her. Thank you. Myra's eyes filled with tears. In that moment, the sleepless nights, the fear, the pressure, it all felt worth. It did, but peace was fragile. As Mira returned to the war room, Reyes handed her a new report. Encrypted chatter, intercepted at the border, hinting at a final, devastating attack. Mira stared at the screen. The enemy wasn't finished. The hardest test was yet to come. She looked around at her team: Lila, Reyes, the analysts and engineers who had become her family. She squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. The city was counting on her. This time, she wouldn't face it alone. The city felt different, now quieter, but tense, as if everyone was holding their breath. Mira sensed it in every meeting, every radio call, every hurried glance exchanged in the command bunker. The enemy's encrypted chatter hinted at something big, something final. Mira knew they were running out of time. The intercepted messages were fragmented, but Mira and her team pieced them together like a jigsaw puzzle. There were references to the window, the relay, and a cryptic phrase: when the lights go out, the city falls. Myra's mind raced. She cross-referenced every blackout, every surge, every unexplained blip in the power grid. Lila, hunched over her laptop, found a pattern. The enemy had been probing the city's electrical substations for weeks, mapping vulnerabilities, testing responses. Reyes, meanwhile, coordinated with field agents, confirming suspicious activity near the main relay station, the heart of the city's power network. Mira called an emergency meeting. They're planning to take down the grid, not just to black out, something bigger. If they hit the main relay, the city could go dark for days. Hospitals, water pumps, communications, everything would stop. General Harlan's face was grim. What do you need? Full access to the grid's control systems, engineers on standby, and every available unit guarding the relay. He nodded. It's yours. The next 24 hours blurred into a frenzy of preparation. Mira's team worked side by side with city engineers, mapping every circuit, every backup, every possible point of failure. They set up remote sensors, ran drills, and rehearsed emergency protocols. As dusk fell, Mira stood on the roof of the relay station, looking out over the city. Lights twinkled in the distance, families ate dinner, children played in courtyards. She felt the weight of every life, every hope, every dream that depended on her. Reyes joined her, silent for a moment. You ready? Mira nodded, her voice steady. We have to be. It started just after midnight. The first explosion rocked a substation on the outskirts, then another and another. The city flickered, lights dimming and surging. Mira's radio crackled with urgent voices. Fire at substation 4. We've got intruders at the north gate. Backup generators failing. Mira was everywhere at once, on the radio, on the monitors, relaying orders, rerouting power, dispatching security teams. Lila shouted updates, her fingers flying over the keyboard. They're in the system trying to override the failsafes. Myra's heart pounded. She saw the enemy's strategy: simultaneous physical and cyber attacks, overwhelming their defenses, forcing them to divide their forces. Don't let them isolate the relay, she shouted. Keep the backup lines open. If we lose the main grid, switch to manual control. Reyes led a team to the relay's entrance, intercepting a group of enemy saboteurs. The firefight was brief, but intense. Bullets ricocheted off concrete. Sparks flew, alarms blared. Mira watched the security feeds guiding Reyes' team through the maze of corridors. Inside the control room, Mira and Lila fought a different battle. Enemy hackers flooded the network with malware, trying to seize control of the relay switches. Lila's face was pale with concentration. They're good, really good. Myra's mind raced. She remembered an old trick, an air gap, physically disconnecting the control system from the network. Lila, pull the main cable. We go manual. Lila hesitated for half a second, then yanked the thick fiber optic line from its port. The screens went dark, then flickered back to life isolated, but under their control. Outside, Rios' team secured the last entrance. The enemy saboteurs were captured or fled into the night. But the damage was done. 3 substations were burning, and the main relay was running on emergency power. Myra stared at the control panel. If the relay failed, the city would go dark. But if she diverted too much power, she risked overloading the system, causing a catastrophic meltdown. She called the engineers. What's the safest way to keep the grid alive? An older engineer, sweat beading on his brow, replied, "We can reroute through the old industrial line. It's risky, untested for years, but it might buy us time." Mira made the call. "Do it." The team worked in frantic silence, flipping switches, monitoring gauges, praying the ancient line would hold. For a moment, the lights across the city flickered, then steadied. Mira let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Dawn broke over a battered but still living city. Smoke curled from the damaged substations, but the skyline glowed with light. Myra's team slumped in their chairs, exhausted but triumphant. General Harlan arrived at the relay, shaking Myra's hand. "You saved the city again, Patel." She smiled, weary but proud. "We all did." But as she looked out over the rooftops, Myra knew the enemy would try again. The war wasn't over. The next move would be even harder, even more desperate. She turned to her team, Lila, Rios, the engineers and guards who had become her family. "Rest up. We'll need everything we've got for what's coming next." For the first time, Myra didn't feel too young or too alone. She felt ready. The city survived the night, but the scars were everywhere: burned substations, shattered windows, exhausted faces. Mira felt the fatigue in her bones, but she also sensed something else. The enemy was desperate. This was the last act, the final gambit. The coalition's resolve had held, but so had the enemy's fury. Just as Myra's team began repairs, a new encrypted message arrived. This one was different. It wasn't a threat or a taunt, it was a code, a riddle embedded in a string of numbers and symbols. Myra's heart raced as she stared at the sequence. It was a challenge, clearly meant for her. She gathered her team. "This is personal. They want me to solve it." Lila examined the code. It's layered classic cipher, but with a twist. They're using city grid coordinates and timestamps. Reyes frowned. "Could it be a trap?" Myra nodded. "Almost. Certainly. But if we don't solve it, we'll always be one step behind." The team worked in tense silence, piecing together the puzzle. Mira's mind darted between maps, logs, and her own intuition. She realized the code pointed to 4 locations across the city, each tied to a critical piece of infrastructure: the main hospital, the central library, the water treatment plant, and the city's oldest bridge. Myra's stomach dropped. They're planning simultaneous attacks. If they succeed, the city will collapse. No water, no medical care, no escape routes. General Harlan gave her full authority. "You lead the response, Patel. I trust your judgment." Mira dispatched teams to each location, pairing her most trusted people with local responders. She took the bridge herself, knowing it was both a vital artery and a symbolic target. At the bridge, Mira coordinated with engineers and bomb squads. She walked the length of the structure, searching for anything out of place. The air was thick with tension. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Suddenly, her radio crackled. "We found a device north tower, under the pedestrian walkway." Myra ran, heart pounding. The bomb squad was already at work, sweat beading on their brows. The device was sophisticated, rigged with a timer and a remote trigger. She called Lila. "Can you jam the signal?" Lila worked her magic, flooding the area with interference. The timer kept ticking, but the remote was dead. The bomb tech looked at Mira. "We can defuse it, but we need time." Mira relayed the update to the other teams. At the hospital, races. Squad found a second device in the generator room. At the library, a firebomb was hidden in the archives. At the water plant, a chemical canister was rigged to the filtration system. Each team faced its own race against the clock. Mira's voice was calm but urgent as she coordinated the simultaneous defusals. "Focus. Trust your training. We do this together." She checked in with each team, offering advice, relaying updates, keeping everyone steady. The minutes crawled by. Sweat dripped down her back. At the bridge, the bomb tech finally gave a thumbs up. Disarmed. One by one, the other teams reported success. The last call came from Reyes. "It's done. All clear." Mira let herself breathe for the first time in hours, but the enemy wasn't finished. As Mira's team celebrated, a final message flashed on her screen. "You win this round, but you can't save everyone." At that moment, a distant explosion echoed from the city's outskirts, a decoy meant to draw resources away. Mira's instincts screamed. She scanned the city map, searching for what she'd missed. Then she saw it. The children's hospital. Left unguarded in the chaos. She shouted into her radio. "All units, converge on the children's hospital." Now, Mira raced through the city in an armored vehicle, sirens blaring. As she arrived, she saw enemy operatives slipping inside, carrying another device. She didn't hesitate. With Reyes and Lila at her side, she led the charge into the hospital's basement. The corridors echoed with shouts and gunfire. Mira ducked behind a pillar, heart hammering as bullets ricocheted off the walls. Reyes returned fire, pinning the enemy down. Lila disarmed the device, hands steady despite the chaos. When the smoke cleared, the enemy was in custody, the bomb was safe, and the hospital's patients were unharmed. Mira slumped against the wall, breathless and shaking. She looked at her team, bruised, battered, but alive. Outside, dawn was breaking. The city, battered but unbroken, was safe. Mira's team gathered on the hospital steps, watching the sun rise over the rooftops. General Harlan arrived, his face lined with exhaustion and pride. "You did it, Patel. You all did." Mira looked at her team, her city, her home. She realized that youth wasn't a weakness, it was her strength. She'd seen what others missed, dared what others feared, and led when no one else could. She also knew the fight was never truly over. There would always be another crisis, another challenge. For now, though, she allowed herself a rare smile. They had won, together. The city was safe. The sun rose over rooftops that had survived fire and darkness, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Mira Patel allowed herself to exhale. She stood on the hospital steps, the dawn breeze cool on her face. Her team gathered around Halila, Reyes, the engineers, the bomb squad, the medics, and even General Harlan. They all looked at her with a mixture of fatigue, relief, and something else, respect. The last 24 hours had been a blur of alarms, gunfire, and impossible choices. Mira's mind replayed every moment, the code, the bombs, the final sprint through the hospital basement. She remembered the fear in her chest, the way her hands shook, the way her voice had steadied as she gave orders. She remembered the faces of her team, the trust in their eyes, the way they'd rallied around her when the city needed them most. General Harlan stepped forward, his uniform rumpled, his eyes tired but shining. "You saved this city, Mira, not just with your mind, but with your heart. You saw what no one else could. You led when others hesitated. And you never gave up, even when the odds were against you." He turned to the assembled crowd, soldiers, doctors, city officials, even a few curious children. Let it be known, age is no measure of courage or wisdom. Today, we all followed the youngest in the room. The applause was genuine, rolling across the hospital steps and echoing down the street. Mira felt her cheeks burn, but she stood tall, meeting every eye. Later, in the command bunker, Mira faced a new kind of challenge, explaining how she'd done it. The generals wanted to know her process, her instincts, her reasoning. The analysts asked for her data, her notes, her code. The mayor asked her to speak at a press conference. Mira answered every question, but she made one thing clear: none of this was done alone. Every decision, every breakthrough, every victory was a team effort. I trusted my people, and they trusted me. That's how we won. She insisted that Lila, Reyes, and the rest of her team join her on stage at the press conference. When the cameras flashed and the questions started, Mira shared the spotlight. This city was saved by teamwork, by courage, and by listening to every voice, even the youngest, even the quietest. News of Mira's leadership spread far beyond the city. Military academies requested her after-action reports. Intelligence agencies asked for her input on new training programs. Young analysts from across the country sent her messages. You give me hope. They always say I'm too young, too new. But now I know I can make a difference. Mira replied to every message she could. She encouraged the doubters, the outsiders, the ones who felt invisible. She told them, keep learning, keep speaking up. The world needs your voice. Weeks passed. The city rebuilt, scars healing, life returning to the streets. Mira's team stayed close, meeting for coffee, sharing stories, laughing at old fears. The war room was quieter now, but Mira never let her guard down. She knew peace was fragile. She kept training, kept learning, kept preparing for whatever might come next. One afternoon, Mira visited her parents. She hugged her mother tightly, let her father ruffle her hair. They sat on the balcony, watching the city lights come on one by one. Her mother asked, "Are you proud of yourself?" Mira hesitated, then nodded. "I am, but I'm more proud of my team. I couldn't have done any of it alone." Her father smiled. That's the mark of a true leader. At the academy, Mira was asked to give a guest lecture. She stood before a room full of cadets, some barely younger than she was, all eager, all nervous. She told them her story, not as a tale of genius, but as a lesson in perseverance. You'll be doubted. You'll be overlooked. You'll make mistakes. But if you keep showing up, keep learning, and keep listening to yourselves and to each other, you'll be ready when the world needs you. A hand shot up in the back. How do you handle being the youngest in the room? Mira smiled. You remember that age is just a number. What matters is what you do when it's your turn to lead. One evening, Mira walked alone through the city. The air was cool, the streets peaceful. She paused on the bridge she'd helped save, watching the river flow beneath the lights. A little girl passed by, holding her mother's hand. She looked up at Mira, eyes wide. "Are you the lady from TV? The one who saved the city?" Mira knelt down, smiling. "I helped. But a lot of people work together." The girl grinned. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Mira's heart swelled. You can be anything you want. Don't let anyone tell you you're too young. Mira's journey was never about being the smartest or the bravest. It was about showing up, speaking up, and refusing to let others define her limits. She learned that leadership isn't about age or rank, it's about courage, empathy, and the willingness to trust others. So, if you've ever been told you're too young, too inexperienced, or just not ready, remember Mira Patel. Remember that sometimes the world's biggest problems are solved by those who were never supposed to have a seat at the table. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories of ordinary people doing the extraordinary, hit subscribe and join us for the next chapter, because the next hero could be you.